NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was set up in 1949. It began as a defensive alliance between America and Western European powers to guard against the Soviet Union and its communist satellites, involved in a tense rivalry with the West after the Second World War.
It is now under pressure, particularly from Donald Trump in the United States, who thinks that his European partners don't carry their fair share of the burden and is wanting them to spend a lot more money on defence. And there are various fundamental reasons why Europe and America are not quite the same soulmates as they used to be. Time was 100 years ago when almost all of the immigrants in America, or the foreign-born population, were from Europe. Now only 10% are. America's trade is getting pulled off towards China, and China itself is the rising rival superpower. So America's attention is increasingly drawn towards the Pacific rather than across the Atlantic. I think it's important to say that NATO has been extraordinarily successful. It's often called the most successful alliance in history. The average lifespan over the past 500 years for a collective defence alliance is just 15 years, and NATO is 70. So it's a great success story. Although it's true that Asia is rising in particular, and also other emerging markets are becoming more important, the relationship between Europe and America remains a terribly strong one. $3 billion worth of trade every day, lots of shared interests, shared values, sometimes wobbly at the edges, but nevertheless fundamentally a shared belief in democracy, which is something that can't be said for example, China and Russia and more authoritarian regimes that America and its European partners increasingly confront. In order to stay relevant for the future, NATO needs to do a number of things. First of all, it needs to live up to the things that it's already promised to do, and back in 2014, NATO members promised that they would aim to spend 2% of GDP on defence. A lot of countries are woefully short of that, so that's task number one. The Europeans in particular need to get much more serious about plugging gaps in their own defence capabilities. But perhaps the biggest task is the third one, responding to the rise of China, a new world where geopolitics is going to look very different, and NATO needs to really work towards a new sort of partnership between Europeans and Americans that can really take into account a response to China as a rival challenger increasingly in the future. Really, the danger for NATO is that if it doesn't respond vigorously enough, America in particular will go its own way, will get fed up, will decide, as President Trump has already threatened to do, that it will just do its own thing and walk away. That would be very worrying for many Americans, but particularly for the European allies. If NATO plays its cards right, I think it will continue to have a critical role in the peace and prosperity for the coming decades, and that's the hope. But it should be very firmly setting its sights on the future as it celebrates its 70th birthday, rather than indulging in nostalgia for the past.